And if you have questions, just would you mind coming up to sit at the table, ask a question, and then if you're really unhappy with the question, stay there. The answer, stay there. But if you're happy with the question, let someone else come up.
Oh,
He
yeah.
didn't say it that way.
Oh, yeah.
Do we do anything to turn on these mics, or do they just work?
Nope, you're all set. You're all ready to go.
Okay, we are ready to go. So I'm going to get started. Thank you all for coming. My name is John Miller. I'm the current chair of Finance Committee. With me is Jeff Calabrese, who's the current vice chair, and Lauren Herman, who's a member of Finance Committee. We're 3 or 4 more members have threatened to come, but this is not a meeting. This is a session with town meeting members. Last year, and it's fun to do this. The idea was started by Megan Blackwell a couple years ago when she was Finance Committee chair, and I don't know if you remember, but we had some meetings with the town meeting members before town meeting began. Last year we were more formal with it, and we met 2 precincts at a time, with town meeting members. And this year we kind of reeled a little bit from fall town meeting, frankly. So we didn't get the handbook done in time. So I apologize for the late notice, but we appreciate you coming here, and we appreciate you being interested in the finances of the town. I've said it a million times. We work for town meeting members. We don't work for anybody else. We don't have any other bosses. So thank you very much for coming. What I thought I'd do is to make good use of the time is you all have the handbook, and hopefully you have some questions, but I prepared some charts of kind of all the charts that are in the handbook. So so that would allow me to bounce around a little bit in response to questions, but I'm open to work however you'd like to work. As I said the first time, we work for you. So I'm prepared to give you a couple 2 or 3 minute overview of why we do what we do, but I'm also prepared to just stop now and take questions. So what's your preference?
Let's hear the sales pitch.
Please.
It's not a sales pitch. I'm gonna let me while I'm right here, I'm gonna open up the other document too, and then I won't ever bounce back and forth again. Oh. There's the handbook. There's my little. Okay. All right, so sorry, let's go to full mode here. How do I do this? There we go. So just a couple of minutes on the big picture. We're worried about the universe, which is one small piece of this up in the right-hand corner is the general funds of revenues. It's about $144 million in 2024. That's what we spend a lot of time on in Springtown meeting. That's the operating budget. And the revenues match the expenses, obviously, but that's the operating budget. So what we spend a lot of time on in the spring at town meeting is that little blue piece of pie up to the upper right. But we're worried about the rest of the universe, okay? So what's shown in this pie is it's 0.8 billion of assets, obligations on pensions, obligations for health care benefits for current and retired employees, debt. And then the capital assets are we own $500 million of capital assets. And where do we get that number? That was a 2022 evaluation by a company called Vanderweill Facility Advisors, VFA. You've heard about them. but they have done that periodically. So, and this does not include the roads. This does not include the water and sewer system. Does not include the sewer plant, the wastewater, the water and the wastewater plants, because that stuff is an enterprise operation, and there's a little piece of it in the revenue fund and in the expense budget. But so the universe of $1.3 billion isn't really the universe. But we don't have numbers for the rest of it. We spend a lot of time in FinCom, and we're trying not to do it, but the reason, this is headcount distributions, and going from the bottom, last year, we broke things up into small departments, and in this chart they're labeled A, and then medium departments, there's a B, then there's 3 large departments, and then there's the schools, which is a large department. But you can see the head counts, and when we first published this, everyone in FinCom said, well, that's too confusing. Well, this is, so here's the library. There's 10 lines in there. And the top line is 2024 headcount. And the bottom line in there is 2013 headcount. So the purpose of this chart is just to show you where the people are, the FTEs that are employed by the town. And it shows you what's happened over time. It's the last 11 fiscal years, okay? And so in the handbook, you can see that, but this shows it up there. So you see all the way up, you get up to, all these departments, we spend a lot of time in FinCom worried about their budgets, but there's very tiny head count. This is the fire department, you know, the schools, the police. But then from here on up, this is schools. From here up is schools. So, which is we're in the business of schools. Winchester's in the business of schools. This is the same thing exactly, only dollars. Okay, so it gives you a sense of, probably 75 to 78, 80% of the dollars is school related. Okay, and which is fine. I mean, I've had 3 kids go through the schools. They get great educations, but we try to spend more time on that kind of. We're trying to spend time on the bigger items: police, fire, DPW, capital. Going back to that very first chart, we've been spending a lot of time on capital because capital is a huge, huge piece of the financial universe that we think needs some further attention. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to get through in the big picture. I have a bunch of slides on revenue. You want to go see how, dollar to the dollar amounts, what the small, medium, and large budgets look like over the last 12 years. Details on schools. We have a package in here on enrollment, if you want to look at enrollment. We have a small package on seats, where the kids are sitting, K through 5. People have interest in that. There's some, I'm going to jump to, I'm going to shut up in about 1 minute. I want to just spend a minute on this. We have we have a line item in the budget. It's called undistributed, and it's over $20 million now. It's a lot of money, and so the reason I raise it is that when let's say the police hire a new officer. His direct salary is, let's say, $100,000. Let's just make the number simple. It's $100,000 of direct expense to hire that police officer. The undistributed costs associated with that hire are not in the police budget. They're in the undistributed budget.
Can you give me an example so that people know what?
I will. I will. So you're gonna get it. So So we've broken that over years, several years, we've broken that up into three big pieces. The big piece is what we think is distributable, okay? The pink. The orange is energy, which is also distributable. You know, the high school spent X dollars on electricity. The high school spent X dollars on oil or energy or gas or whatever. There's 6% of this undistributable line item is in fact undistributable, and I'm going to explain that to you. So this is what goes into all that undistributed line item. So there's a here it is down here. So there's contributory retirement, there's workers' compensation, there's unemployment compensation, the health insurance. It's a big number. Big number. FICA, and this is the OPEB, the other person, post-employment benefits down at the bottom. So this pink chart that I have here is in three pieces. Here it is broken out. We don't think it's possible really to break up human resources, because the human resources department does the whole town. You can't distribute that, right? Same with the legal line item. Same with general insurance. We buy insurance for the town. Megan, you can't hide back up there. There's our reserve fund. We have $400,000 that we can spend if there's an emergency and someone needs money. So that top bucket is what I would call really is undistributed and undistributable. You can't allocate it to pieces. The next line is the employment benefits, and in fact, that number is in fact distributed in the books of the town, but it's not reported to town meeting. It's not distributed when it comes to town meeting. It's kept in this bucket. Hi, Enzo. Please, you have a seat right here. Enzo Racianato, the former FinCom chair. Thanks for coming. And then the bottom is energy. So those are the three pieces, and I think does that answer your question, Bill?
You're really trying to tell us that there's a cost to hire an employee. It's not that their direct salary costs come with a load.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And people need to understand the real cost of FTE.
Yeah, and I think it makes us a little. When we look at all the budget line items, and you could distribute all those costs except for $2 million, and instead of distributing it out to that level, instead you've got it lumped up and it's $21, $22, $23 million. The budget line items are not really representative of what the actual costs are, what the actual expenses are. Okay, I'm going to shut up there, and I told you we have some good news on debt and on pension that Enzo and many chairs long before I was even on FinCom were involved with doing a great job on. So why don't I stop and open it up to some questions, and we'll try to bump around. I have some written questions too from Carol Savage. I have a written question from Bill, which I'm prepared to answer. But fire away. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic so people can.
So a couple questions. I noticed in the report, there was a recommendation from Moody's, around some things that the town should be doing financially, like increasing your reserve. So I'm just curious, I know what Moody's is. It's one of the sort of rating boards.
Right.
When they recommend, are they telling you, if you don't do it, we're gonna downgrade you?
Well, let Enzo or Jeff, one of you guys take that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as binary as that. I think it is a recommendation, and the whole process which we've looked into, Moody's formula changed over the past couple of years where they're placing a much bigger weight on our debt service. So we're not part of those conversations that the town is having, but I wouldn't say a recommendation if you don't do it equals a downgrade. I think it's part of a holistic conversation.
Okay. Because some government entities, when they recommend,
Yeah.
it's really an edict. You either do it or else.
I think there's only 6 or 7 towns in the state, is that right, Enzo, that have AAA still?
It's a very small number, yeah, and.
We're
yeah.
one of them, but there aren't too many.
Yeah, and obviously, the town doesn't want to be downgraded, right? So I think, our financial team and
That's
the
gonna
town
cost us
manager,
more, yeah.
right, is very in tune with those recommendations and making sure that, we're following what we need to follow and versus what's appropriate for the town.
And my second
But
question.
I have one more comment on that, Dan.
Yeah.
By the way, this is Dan Nakamoto, who I happen to know you. But, I think we've been very careful we don't want to be talking to Moody's. I mean, that's the town manager and the financial people inside the town, the legal department. We're not out facing to Moody's. We don't want more than one.
Yeah.
We want direct communication with the people that matter. We don't want to be mucking around with Moody's, but when it has been reported to us that they have repeatedly recommended that we raised our reserve range. And we have asked, and I think, we've never taken a vote, but I think, we don't want to get cross-eyed with Moody's, but that's not our job. We're reporting to you.
Okay. And my other question was, I was just curious, the school department, the school budget is such a large part of operating for the town. I was kind of intrigued that you're reviewing the school expenses, and I wonder if you can give it some background in terms of how that came. Is that is the school department willing in that review process, or?
Well,
Yeah, I would say yes. There's open dialogue. The past 3 years I've been on the committee or part of, we've had meetings. I participated in their subcommittee meeting just to sort of see how they're framing their budget. And then once it's formally handed over to us, yes, there is open communication. We already have a meeting scheduled with the school department to present to FinCom broadly. So I would say absolutely there's open dialogue and communication.
Okay, well, I think that's a good development.
Yeah, last year I know we had a lot of questions and we got a lot of answers. So I think that building on that this year, I'm in charge of the school budget, and that's my intent. We all need to be talking to us and talking to each other and see where we need to be.
All right.
Yeah, a couple backgrounds so you understand. So, the way the town operates, there's another layer of support that is not visible in the budget. So, the controller, the treasurer, the town is running the back end for the schools on the financial side. So every year, there's a report on October 1st that goes from the town and the superintendent and the town manager. We saw it for the first time last year. But the town runs the back room for much of the schools. So we're running, the town runs the health benefit calculations, the payroll, the writing of checks, the running of the FICA, all that stuff is run by the town in the back room. So even with the loaded, this fly loves me. Even with the loaded, the undistributable that we talked about, the town is basically running a back room for the schools, as the town does for the rec department, which is an enterprise, as the town does for the water and sewer department, which is an enterprise. So we have access to all that. Stacy Ward has all the records. So we have what the budget was last year and what the actuals were against the line items in the budget for all departments, including schools. So it's not hidden. There's no separate set of books somewhere that's run that the school's running. It's run by the books are being run by the town.
okay.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
This doesn't want to go on.
I had a few questions. First, I want to thank,
I don't think you have to push your button, Jack. They all
No,
work on
it's
that.
got a green light when that doesn't, but,
Oh, okay.
go ahead.
wanted to thank Finance Committee. I mean, getting the information and understanding the nuts and bolts and how things work. Nothing ever feels like it'll be perfect in the end, but this is, from a couple of years ago where we are today,
Can you say, just say for the audience, we just.
I'm sorry, yeah, Bill McFadden, Precinct 7, town meeting member, so. And I had a question, it was on the capital assets, you know, that number will be $1 billion soon, you know, right, coming at it. So when we drill down on that, I just throw a number out in my head that says you probably need 10% of the value to support those things. Do we go back in and make sure, because it seems like we've got enough structural deficits in this town, that as we add into the capital asset side, we may just be exacerbating that? So are we taking care of what we have today?
Well, that is probably the question that's probably the most prominent question for me, in fact, you know, in my time on Finance Committee. I don't think it's, you know, it seems, and I come from a background in civil engineering and in capital programming and in finance, so I'm not, this is old ground for me. But, and others have too, other members of the committee. Hafiz Adamji was, used to run capital programs for Novartis worldwide. We have Derek Ross is on the committee who ran similar programs for Philips worldwide. So we have a lot of expertise in capital asset management. I think it's fair to say, Bill, that we don't, so far, we're not thinking of, well, we own $500 million worth of assets. How much money do we need to put away each year to keep those in good working order? We are not there yet. We are trying to get there. And we are, I think it's fair to say Finance Committee is pushing for that in some form or another, but it's not there. We're coming from the other side, which is, and the town manager put out a capital plan a couple days ago, I think, actually. What we do now is we ask the department heads what they need for capital. And then those needs bubble up to the capital planning committee. There's a ranking process that bubbles up to you in town meeting. It bubbles through us. We have 2 representatives on capital. Our representatives are typically uncomfortable ranking. Like, do we want a police car or do we want a new gym floor? I mean, some of these things are kind of, you know, they seem to be Hobson choices. Okay, so but that is a big issue.
So we ask the department heads, why not like building people that really know?
Well, I think one of the things we've been advocating for, and I don't want to only be the only person to talk, so other people jump in, but the town has engaged VFA, the same company, Vanderwolf Facility Advisors, and they are in the process of doing an assessment of all the town's buildings. And I actually have an example here that I can put up on the screen if someone wants to see it sometime during the meeting. But so they are professionals that go through and say that HVAC system's got 2 years to go. It's going to cost X dollars to replace it. You should be thinking about that 3 years from now. So that's where we're trying to get to.
So we're stepping toward nirvana, right?
Well, we're stepping towards clearing deferred maintenance, which involves more money. So I think that's the rub. That's the rub.
And in the budgets, as you're looking at them this year too, and what struck me was just looking at the FTE numbers. You see it in the school, lots of people, makes sense. But within the individual departments we have here, I have to imagine we're at the mercy of contracting out a lot of services. Is that the case? That these aren't people like DPW, they're not doing everything that's out there. We're probably handcuffed to a number of contractors, and we're just takers probably at that point. Do we have a good feel for the process behind some of
He's a
that?
tough questioner. Enzo, you take that one.
I was gonna say, I don't think so. Like, I think actually we have a really senior staff in, you know, DPW and a lot of the different departments that do most of the work. Our professional services, I think, for the most part, are very limited and, you know, very fought over those dollars, right? Whenever we're trying to do something externally, because then it becomes, you know, if it's an external dollar, it becomes almost a discretionary dollar. So there's a lot more scrutiny on those, right, versus the central staff. So I would say, no, I would say most of the work is being done by employees.
And I think I wanna look at the professional service budget, I think there's a preference for keeping things internal. I know we've had sort of vendor conversations, hey, maybe we should think about consulting services for this. There was some risk and hesitancy there, so I would say agree with Enzo.
But there are examples of what you're saying is correct. So like if you go back, we have data going back to 1982 from headcounts, right? So you go way back, and like there were more people at DPW by 20, 30 people. Now the water and sewer became an enterprise, and some of the DPW joined the enterprise. So they're self-contained. They pay for themselves. They pay for all their health benefits. That's in the water rate. So they're not in this overhead problem.
Right.
But like cemetery now we contract out to take care of to maintain the cemetery. So there are examples of, DPW still is lean and mean, and when something actually has to be done now and moved now, DPW can do it, and they know how to do it, and they're good at it. But it's not the same as it was. They're not paving roads anymore.
Okay. And that's good to hear too, sorry.
And I have a note, I think that's a good lens to apply here, sort of like what we did with undistributed, sort of what is the universe? It's not just the direct costs, but also for FTEs, that's also external employees that we contract out, and what does that bubble look like? So we can look into that.
Okay. And don't want to put my tongue on the third rail. But the one-line item school budget that you guys look at, and it sounds like you've got a good dialogue now and can ask a lot of questions in. As you watch the population curve bend and come down, and the FTEs, the school population's dropping, the FTEs are coming up, the costs are coming up. Is there any conversations surrounding that in general? It's just optics, right? So I know that there's probably now there's flies coming in.
Better you than me.
So it's probably optics. It just happens to look that way. But do we have a feel as to why? And I know SPED, right? That's a big part of it, and you have to pay that. But are there any elements, if you chunk up SPED, that it's not just like a paid-for service, like you might actually have a body that can help do something else within the school system or anything like that? Just spitballing.
I think it is the third rail of town discussions. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we started. I got a question from Carol Savage actually said, why are you publishing these open seat analyses in the handbook? And it's not we're not trying to be on the offensive, but I think it's fair to say that the schools are not about to be tipped over by overcrowding. I think it's very fair to say that. It's hard to imagine a scenario where K through 5, no matter what happens, 40B, we're a long way away from being overcrowded in the schools, and so you can see the sections are ticking down slowly. Remember when you were chair, Enzo, I think the K through 5 sections were 113, and
Yeah, I mean, there was a big discussion at town meeting around, just like ultimately in the past, our school budget is ticked up because our population of kids was ticking up. But then at some point, it started, certainly right during COVID, it ticked down significantly, and it's significantly lower than it's been from the high point, right? So, the argument was always made like, all right, well, we have more kids, so we need more money, all the way up. And then, when you had the dip, there was a certain amount of pushback, right, around, does that mean, all right, now the numbers are going down, so now you need less sections and less, so there was a lot of discussion around that. And yeah, I think we went from, 113 was the number of sections in the elementary school, and I think at that time, they settled down to 110, and then now they've ticked all the way down to, I think, 101. So
But
it's
there
gone
was a
down.
big furor at town meeting. I think we came, FinCom came, I think Enzo was the chair, might have been, it was the year before maybe it was Nicole, but we recommended 110 sections instead of 113, and
Oh, yeah.
turned out that was a, you know,
No, it was 111. I was vice chair,
Okay.
and Zoe was chair.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I still have nightmares about it, so I remember. Yeah, so I think we were recommending a couple of sections lower. The school board agreed to disagree, and then, you know, ultimately went to town meeting, and town meeting decided.
Yeah,
So,
and that's fair. I'm
that's the way it
just
should work.
trying to demystify
So,
how it comes.
so what we've been trying to do is to take the data and kind of have a treaty last year out. The vice chair, your penance for being vice chair is to do the school budget. So Jeff's the school budget this year, but,
I would say that the only reason we have a handbook with all this data is because there's been cooperation and dialogue. So we have everything in one place, and then, yeah, I think it would be negligent for us not to ask those questions. Like, I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers, and we should ask the questions and let town meeting make decisions.
so we started publishing charts like this last, 2 or 3 years ago, which show you how many kids are in each school, in each grade, how many sections there are. And like in this example, the pink ones, there are 3 sections in this is this current year. There are 3 sections. If this chart wasn't in the handbook that I sent to you, because we didn't get the data on Friday night, so this is new. But there are 3 places where the policy is not being followed. So, you know, but Carol Savage asked, "Were you expecting kids to move?" Or like, no. We're just putting out the data so people have an understanding of, you know, and we've been very cooperative with the superintendent and Andrew Marin and Peter Rowe, and they give us the data.
That's great.
Yeah,
I
Megan?
I just feel obligated to add, even though the finance committee suggested we were motivated to trim the budget because of the number of sections, the education budget does not have to follow that recommendation. They're in complete charge of what's done with the budget, so just for
Yeah.
clarification.
So just in case people didn't hear that at home, Megan Blackwell is the former chair, made the point that, you know, what town meeting does is they approve a single line item, a dollar amount for schools. It's up to the schools to decide where to spend it. We do the analysis before based on what they give us, but they're in charge of how they spend their money. But we do, at the end of each year, we get a before and after. Here's where you said you're gonna spend the money, here's where you did spend the money. We look at that and publish a report about that.
Well, it's great you have a good dialogue with the schools. And once again, I can't say enough about this financial summary. It's helpful, very demystify everything there, and I don't envy anything you guys do.
All right, thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Jack Lemenager, 6th Precinct. I have a question and then an unrelated recommendation. I carry on with the third rail discussion. When I first joined town meeting in 2010, or the first budget year that I covered was the spring of 2010, it was rude awakening that we had that one vote. We're niggling over 15,000 here and 50,000 there, and then all of a sudden we're hit with what amounts to about 2/3 of our budget with a single line item. And then I remember looking at sort of seeing that at that time, this was 14 years ago, special education, don't quote me on this, I think was about 12% of the school budget, which kind of blew my mind. And what is it now? It's about 30%?
Yeah, we have a chart for that.
Yeah, I know you do, but head count, I was
This
really
is enrollment,
shocked.
but I think somewhere
The total head count for the full-time employees in the town is 910.76. The total head count for SPED is 218. That's like a quarter of the town's employees are dedicated to, and I guess my question, I don't know if you know the answer, is I know a lot of these are forced on us. We don't have anything, the town, I should say, the school department has to offer these special education services, and because it's a state or federal law. Is there any, I mean, how high can it go? If it was 12% 14 years ago, and what is it, 30% now? How is it gonna eat up the whole school budget one day? Is there any effort being made to put a cap on that, or, I mean,
Well-
can anybody do anything?
So let me fill in the background with what the law requires. So, a student who is entitled to an independent education plan must be given that plan by the department. The first $40,000 of the cost of that plan is absorbed by the town as a matter of law. The next whatever, so like an out-of-district placement could easily be $100,000. Between $40,000 and $100,000, the state will reimburse 75% of that overage. So let's say a $100,000 student, the town is going to be reimbursed $55,000 of that $100,000. But that's by state law. Last year we recommended and offered to go see the governor, go see our legislators. Those floors and those reimbursement rates are established by state law. So the town is trying to do the right thing, right? We're trying to keep kids in classes with their peers, trying to do the right thing, and I think we're known for doing the right thing. And so I think the only practical way of trying to rebalance what the costs are is through a change in statute.
I would also add that I think to fully answer that question, you should start with a zero-based budget. So the way we're seeing the budget, it sort of take last year, roll it over, play with the margins, and sort of here's what we need. I've been lobbying for a zero-based budget. Concord does one. They start out with zero. They get everybody in for a summit. What are the services we need to deliver as of today? What does it cost? What do we need to deliver those services? So you can get to much more of a black and white answer of, are we in balance or not? And I think to what John mentioned, talking to the state, I think that there needs to be better dialogue there. Is Winchester being as aggressively advocated for as we should be? We have financial constraints, we have things we're working against. Are we having the right conversations? So I think it's those two items.
So this is a chart. This is some more detail, and I can send this to anyone. I'll send this whole package. Anyone who wants this package, I'll send it to you. But so what this is year by year since 2016, and it's pre-K enrollment, and then how many of the pre-K kids have an IEP. So it's a distribution. And what becomes immediately obvious is that this is very intractable. This is a tough thing to deal with because the number of children in each grade with an IEP varies from year to year. People go in and out of IEPs. They move around in the system. It's very, very hard to this is a management. It's very hard to manage, and it's very hard to isolate. I don't. And so and then the chart below shows you what percentage of kids in each grade are in an IEP, and it's very high in pre-K, but those numbers aren't changing over time. It seems to be kind of what it is, but it's an intractable. We have not figured out. I don't think school department has figured out exactly what it is they would do differently. So I think in large part it's one of those things that
They kind of have their hands tied.
yeah.
Yeah. Totally unrelated, just a recommendation and a commendation. In the past few years, Enzo and Megan and you, John, have made very strong cases for sustaining the strong Moody's rating, and I don't think that can be overstated. The town meeting sometimes gets carried away and they want to spend, they make these amendments to add money to various budgets, and I think you've in the past been very strongly, you've gotten up there and recommended against some of these for that reason, that we don't have the money and the importance of protecting that rating. And I would urge you to continue to do that throughout town meeting.
And on that note, we have our stated objectives in the handbook. Number 1 is striving to deliver a balanced budget. Number 2 is maintaining AAA bond rating.
Yeah.
3, capital. And I forget which town meeting member at fall town meeting, he had a great recommendation of for anything financial that goes to town meeting, put a template, what's the impact of the bond rating? And just have that conversation on the piece of paper, and then just make that a template for the articles, so, yeah, I think we intend on holding on that front.
Living within our means like we all do in our own households.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're connected, but the free cash discussion is connected to capital. And it's more connected than people I think people realize, even on Finance Committee. And let me, there's a few, I'm gonna go to slide 6 for Darren. So this is where the money comes from. And just to give you an idea, in 2023, that was the budget that you passed. And then the 23 actual, we took in $12 million instead of less than $10 million in local receipts. We took in like $2 million more in local receipts. And one of the crazy numbers that I still cannot imagine how, you know, and when we recommended this we generally follow what the controller does. I mean, we're not in the business of outguessing the controller and, you know. But down here, investment income, we made $900,000 in investment income in 2023, and the budget was $800,000 came in investment. That was post bump from COVID stock market.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that some of those things are unanticipated. We cannot expect them. So sometimes in town meeting, people say, well, you blew the free cash estimate. Yeah, we did blow the free cash estimate, but number one, the controller also blew the free cash estimate because our estimates are usually pretty close. But number two, it's not only what's left. It's not just turnbacks. It's revenue. So this next slide, I just take a piece, and this slide shows you how dependent we're on the property tax. But so what happened last year in free cash, we took in about $3 million in extra receipts that we weren't anticipating. And there were $3 million in turnbacks. But at town meeting, it was, you blew it by $6 million. Well, no, that's not correct. So, but it's nice to have cash. I mean, it's nice to have cash. So we're not upset, but, and then we did some more analysis since fall town meeting. The town budget has gone up. This is a stacked turnback history. Like every year from 2014. Where did the turnbacks come from? And the big turnbacks are in personnel benefits, this brown area, and it's varied widely since COVID. So we have not been very good at predicting turnbacks. But
Once you start getting into this, then you start spending that money. And to John just said, the predictability side of it, you know, and the principle of you don't spend non-recurring dollars for recurring expenses.
Exactly.
So that is a slippery slope once you start doing that.
Spending money before you have it.
Exactly. Or
Not
we're
smart.
gonna make X dollars
Yeah.
in investment income, next thing you know, rates go back down to zero.
no one in FinCom thinks we're gonna make $900,000 in investment income. We have never made more than $40,000 in any prior year.
And just like your personal budget, it's better to miss on the overperform side than the underperform side. If we missed it by $6 million, we'd be in a world of trouble, right? So
Yeah.
I think you have to be conservative with this, and that way, that's how you end up with a really nice operating reserve number. And now we have a lot more flexibility as we start thinking through this next set of capital projects. You know, you've got, $5 or $10 million worth of, you wanna call it excess reserve that you can, think about maybe leveraging for some of that for capital projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could go on to some other questions.
Yeah, sure.
That we,
Yeah, I was gonna just finish this one thing and then, where was it? I guess I didn't include it. Oh, this is a chart, and I can send this to you. This is, so this is cash, and this is spending by town meeting.
Interesting.
So, you know, in FY '21, outside of the budget, town meeting spent $2.3 million. In FY '22, over 3. So, on things, nice things. Yeah, it's your right to spend money on nice things. I'm not complaining about it, but it's nice to have free cash too for purposes like that. So like when we get to town meeting and there is something that, like, I don't know, like a playground or whatever, you think of it. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Bill Band, town meeting member from Precinct 5. And I sent a question to you, John, with regard to the Community Preservation Act.
Yeah.
So that's coming down the pipe, as you know. There will be a warrant article with regard to whether we should or shouldn't proceed down the track to establish a community preservation fund for the town. You know, there's hundreds of communities across the Commonwealth which have these funds.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
Winchester, for a variety of reasons, seems to have not adopted these programs. And so I'd like to get some perspective, or can you give us any guidance as town meeting members how to understand the pros and cons
Yep, sure.
of a CPA, because we like to be better educated than sitting in a town meeting and then having the debate at that point.
So these two slides are at the back of this list of slides. These are the two slides in that slide deck that I was going to present at Fall Town Meeting on Article 33. We have under our bylaws, we have a right, FinCom has a right to comment on any article. I was not allowed to comment on Article 33. I chose not to argue about that. It was chaotic enough. But this is the first slide that I was going to present, and Hafiz at Adam G had done some very good modeling for Mike Betancourt, and I think you probably have seen all these models. So our question, I think, from FinCom is, there's two. First relates to process. We have an issue now in how we run capital, how we take care of our capital assets. And do we want, right now we have EFPBC kind of running school assets, kind of, but it also runs through the town. We have the town manager running the town side of capital assets. Do we want to put a third player on the board running capital projects? So I think back in March, I sent a draft of a proposed ordinance that would integrate whatever the CPA does with a single capital planning process for the entire town, so that whatever is funded out of the CPA, should it pass, is done as part of an integrated plan. So that would be my first issue, and I think town meeting members should be thinking about that. I mean, do we really I want to get a project done, so I apply to the EFPBC to get it done. It's a playground at, I got them. It's a playground at one of the schools. I go to EFPBC for it. I go to the CPA for it. I go to the capital planning committee for it. I got 3 applications going for the same project. And is that what we want, or do we want it integrated? And I think that's one issue. The second issue, this is the piece, this was, I thought, maybe the most important piece from Hafiz's analysis. And so he made some assumptions. And the CPA match of these assumptions would be $300,000 per year in year 2, which $300,000, it's a lot of lunches. It's a sizable amount. But we would have to tax ourselves $1.5 million for the privilege of getting the $300,000. So that's the other piece. So, and I'm just speaking for myself, others can speak now, but for me, it's worth getting, but we don't need 3 capital planning processes now. That would be my big concern. If we're gonna tax ourselves, you know, you're taxing yourself 80% of the 100% you're gonna end up with, right?
So could you give us some perspective on what this integrated organizational structure might look like? I mean, is it feasible to have such a thing?
Well, I think so. I sent it to Mike. Mike has it. Mike Betancourt has it. I mean, it's not our place to. I sent that as a citizen. I mean, there's 9 members on the CPA committee. So they could overlap with capital planning, or they could overlap with the town manager, and it could be required, I believe, that they come up with a single plan, so that we don't need any more circular motion on capital. We need to fix stuff. I mean, I'm certainly on board. I don't want anything broken. Most people think I'm really cheap, and many people on the finance committee are cheap, but we're not. We'd be happy to spend money, happy to spend wise money.
I also think there's a risk of putting the focus in the wrong place. So if this becomes a massive debate, yes, we want another 300,000, but we're staring at $40 million worth of capital projects. So as town meeting, making sure that that's what we're talking about. That's the problem we're trying to solve, and that the CPA is a piece to that. But without a holistic strategy, I think it's very easy to say this is gonna solve our problems. We spend a lot of debate and time here, people are fried at the end of town meeting, and we're not any closer to solving our capital problems.
But the warrant article isn't going to be presented as a solution to all our capital problems. It's only gonna be presented as a way to establish a new fund to
Yeah.
to
No, I
tap
understand.
into, state funds to be able to chip away at some of the deficits that we have. So that if you frame it as a bigger problem, it's likely to face difficulties at town meeting. But if we can narrow down and be specific as to the pros and cons of what this type
No, I
of fund would
get
be.
it. I get it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, again, that's my perspective. I'd love to see a holistic strategy. So when we retire debt, what do we do with that money? The CPA goes into the fund. Here's how we allocate it out.
Right.
I think if we silo these decisions, they all make sense on their own. But when you put them together, are we really addressing the problem?
But if you take that position, and the Finance Committee takes that position in this warrant article, it's gonna come up and recommend against
Well, that's not what I'm
CPA,
saying, and I'm not speaking on
then
behalf
that's
of the
gonna be a
finance
problem.
committee. Well, I'm
In
not,
terms of
yeah,
taking a step forward to addressing some of our financial
Right.
shortfalls, so that's what I want to get.
I think, I'm not speaking for Finance Committee either.
Right.
There's many people on Finance Committee that think that the capital problem, writ large, is something we need to work on.
As John put in the first slide, we worry about the universe.
Right.
So we'll have our debate, we'll have our dialogue, we'll vote, and then we'll present both sides if there are both two sides. And then give town meeting members everything the best that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like on CPA, I'm sitting in the same seat you guys are in terms of as a town meeting member trying to learn more about it, right? Like,
Right.
I think there are pros and cons. The pro is you get an extra $300,000 for free, but the cons are a couple of things, right? Number one, that $300,000 comes with strings, right? Because now this 1.5 million, you have to spend it on certain things, and there's a certain percentages of things that get
Allocation.
percentage for, is my understanding, right?
Yep.
Right, so I think we have to understand that. The second is you have potentially a separate process for that, right? Just like they were saying. So now you have a separate group deciding on things that are different than the central capital process. And then the third thing is that 300,000 is based on a 20% match. And that match is based on how many this is my understanding, right?
The more people sign up,
Right,
Yeah.
so.
The more chickens at the
It's
at
all
the
about,
trough.
the state has a certain fund that they say is a CPA fund, let's say it's $3 billion. And then all the towns that signed up for CPA that passed it, they get a chunk of that money. So early on, there were very few towns jumping in the pool, so they got a lot more money. And then as
Almost
more towns jump in the
100%.
pool, there's less place to swim,
Right.
right? So I wonder how much, if you go 5 years out, 10 years out, more and more towns jump in, that 20% turns into 15%, turns into 10%, it slowly comes down. But those are the things that I want to
No one on
understand.
FinCon that I'm aware of is against this per se, but it's, you just kind of walk through it and make sure that we're after the capital issue too, you know? Does that make sense?
No, I just wanted to find
Yeah.
out if you could give us some perspectives that we can use as we're considering.
We actually, I did that as an individual. I sent a draft of a article. I think I got it from Richard Rohan, who worked on the original, the last time this came before town meeting. Took Richard Rohan's proposed article and fiddled with it so that the capital process under CPA would be married with the town's capital process, so that, like, you know, you can't get 3 bites at the apple if you wanna have a, you know, I'd be building basketball courts everywhere. The only thing we need is basketball.
I just finish, just to make everybody aware who might be listening, that the Winchester Town Meeting Members Association has a discussion board that we've got up and running, which is, the purpose of which is to allow town meeting members to share information and follow the various issues as we go into
Yeah.
Town meeting. CPA and others
Yeah,
are
great.
topics, and so I would encourage everybody to follow, contribute, raise questions, and use that vehicle so that you can be more informed
Yeah.
going into the town meeting.
Other questions? I have some from Carol Savage. So I'm not done yet. Let me just, she asked about the increase in local receipts last year, and I think we covered that. I think there's a mistake in the handbook, which, the 44% increase was against the budget, not against the actual from FY22. So I think that's my mistake, that I think I need to fix that, so Carol could find that. Let me, let's see, I thought I had I do not have a, She asked about, let me read her question. This is a question about engineering studies. Finance Committee got in a lot of pushback back and forth at the fall town meeting about funding engineering studies. And Carol asks, isn't this a chicken and egg problem? How can the town manager define scope and funding without a sense for the engineering cost estimate? And I think, you know, I did do that. Here it is. I printed out something that if you wouldn't mind passing out, Jeff. So this is a two pages from the printout for the West Side Fire Station from the VFA, Vanderwild Facility Advisors. So this is what they're doing right now. And I just did this afternoon. I don't have it on the slide. I thought I should have, but I don't. So Vanderwild Facility Advisors went to visit the West Side Fire Station, and this is the output of their review at the West Side Fire Station. So I just highlighted a couple things. So if you go down to on the first page, see it says exterior doors. This is the exterior, the big doors for the trucks that go in and out of the fire station. See the third column over, the lifetime, their estimated life of that is 30 years. Their unit cost is 12 grand. There's 2 of them, and they're estimating they need to be replaced in 2045, and the cost is 78 grand. So this is what they're doing, okay? And if there's 6 pages of this, and if you go to the next page, there's another example. There's a breakaway exhaust removal system that's down near the bottom. I highlighted it. That needs to be replaced in 2027. It's going to cost 200 grand. So VFA is doing this for all the major buildings in town. And this is the stuff that, you know, Carol asks, how can they know what something's going to cost unless they have gone out for an engineering investigation and planning? And with respect to Carol, the answer is, it's done all the time. That's what people do in the construction industry. You have a sense of what a school costs per square foot. Like, you know, people knew what Lynch was gonna cost, plus or minus 5 or 10%. As soon as someone told them how many classrooms there were, how big the gym was, and are we having an auditorium? You know, they're estimates. But that's how the world works in construction. So what we're expecting is that the VFA effort, which is ongoing now, is gonna produce data like this, which will be used to pull off future projects so that our predictions about capital needs become real. And we're not just waiting for someone to come in and say the Mystic boiler broke yesterday. Because that should be on a report for Mystic School saying, the Mystic boiler's got a year to go, it's gonna cost 50 grand, it should be on our capital list, we should already have bought it. So I think, that's the push we're trying to make on the capital side. Questions about that? Yeah?
Thanks, Steve Boxansky, Precinct 4. And forgive my negligence here, but I'm trying to understand a little bit more what you're talking about. I've heard some bits and pieces about capital planning and having everything sort of on one list. Do we have one list of a schedule of all the key assets in town that we need to take care of?
I hope one's coming. I haven't seen one yet, but I hope one's coming. And I think the VFA effort, and you can see an example of that from that little report you're looking at. There's one of those for Lynch. So when Lynch opens, there won't be anything on it requiring immediate replacement. But the windows will be due in 30 years or 40 years. And the roof will last 25. And those things are known. And those things should be tracked.
So we're not tracking them now?
We have not seen that. We are pushing for it.
And can you, I'm sorry again for my lack of understanding of town government or awareness here, but who is doing I know there's a capital planning committee. Can you explain to me a little bit about how capital planning is done now?
I think I've been talking too much. Anyone want to take a stab at this? You want me to do it?
I'd say it's, as of right now, to my understanding, if you split it up into new capital investments, new buildings, we're building something new versus maintenance and repairs. I think we're well in the maintenance and repairs world. Reactive, fixing things as they break. I think that's current state. So the stabilization funds are basically your repair and maintenance fund, but also dips into the new capital investment part. I think that's the thing where we're trying to separate and draw a line of new building equals 10% reserves that go somewhere for when we have to fix things according to something like this. So I think that's ideal state, and yes, that's what we're pushing for.
The
And
charter,
how do we achieve that?
the charter, Steve, the charter, our form of government is a strong town manager. We have a strong town manager form of government. The idea is we have professional management. So if you read the charter, it's Article 4. And the town manager runs the show. And so we should support her. She's eminently qualified. She's a PE in civil engineering. She can run this, she can run a kind of system like this in her sleep to get out of the way. That's my own.
I would say that that's exactly what she's doing, right? This is some of the benefits that we're getting by having the former town engineer become the town manager, right? She understands what it means to put a capital plan in and put it, and that's why we're going through the software and getting it. But before it was very, I would say, a little bit more, you had a maintenance budget for things that would fix, and then as soon as things couldn't be maintained anymore, they'd pop into the capital planning committee, and then we'd, rack and stack them against a whole bunch of other priorities, and, try to pick as many as you can do, given the limited funding that you have. And, sometimes that meant you got to everything, and most of the time it meant you get to the most important things, and then the rest push into next year.
We're deferring a lot of maintenance, in my view. Bill McPadden mentioned, I think you said 10% of the. I think hopefully that's very high. I think a number we had someone in FinCom in October, Chris Gordon, who used to run capital programs for Massport. And his estimate is it's 1 to 3%, depending on, how old is your building? You might spend more. Is it brand new? So it's 1 to 3% of the replacement cost should be put into a fund to manage maintenance and small capital repairs. A piece of the roof is broken, you don't need to replace the roof, but you need to fix that piece of the roof. It's a capital repair, but you need the money for it. Other questions about that? Steve, other questions?
I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to prepare town meeting members for these ongoing costs and how they're prioritized? And are we better off just leaving it up to the town manager? Sounds like she is doing all this, and is that a best practice, or are there other practices that are maybe better,
Well,
or?
I think there's an interesting chart. If you look at the town manager put a budget summit document out a couple of days ago. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it shows debt going down over time. But that's very, very wishful thinking, because as soon as we finish Lynch, it's time to move on to Morocco. And as soon as we finish Morocco, it's been 30 years since we did Lincoln. And as soon as we finish Lincoln,
Ambrose.
it's Ambrose. The notion that we're gonna stop borrowing and the debt's gonna come down and the debt exclusions are gonna be over, not happening. It's never going to happen. That was one of Carol's questions. When can taxpayers expect the debt exclusion, the debt service to come down? And the answer is never. And that's the real answer. It's gonna go up. It's not going down. Roger?
So a corollary to that is, can there be any expectation for pressure to come off the operating side of the budget? Given what you're talking about on the capital side?
I don't, unless you're talking about structural changes. I mean, I don't know how I don't know where you.
So
We're pretty lean. The town is lean. The town does not have, doesn't have, on the town side of the government, it's lean. It's running lean.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basic math, right? Like, your revenues go up 3% a year, right, on average, right, plus or
No,
minus.
they go up closer to 5%.
Okay. I'm pretty sure, like, if you look at how much you have 2.5% that comes from increasing of property tax, and then there's a little bit of growth on top of that, so. And by the way, 95% of your revenues are coming from your property tax, so.
Yeah, but that assumes that you're not passing overrides, which we have
Well,
consistently
okay, well, if you
done.
include overrides, but that's where I was driving, right, is if your regular old revenue goes up by around 3.5%, let's say, but your most of your costs are salaries, and those have been going up, a little bit higher, right, 3.5%, 4%. So you're never, and there's never gonna be, I'm not sure how you would get to a point where your expenses are growing less than your revenue. Like, ultimately, it's trying to keep those as close as possible, and then hopefully you only have to pass an operating override, very rarely, once every 5 years or once every 10 years.
I think what we've been playing around with, Roger, and, is and it's very preliminary, we've just been plunking, Morocco school. I think Chris Nixon said 2029, right? FY '29, I think he said but plunk $100 million in FY '29 for Morocco school, and then plunk, say, $80 million for Lincoln School 6 years later, and just start putting those kind of things in the capital plan, and you realize, I suppose the schools could restructure and have a single elementary school, or a single, combine the high school and the middle school, or, something like that, maybe would save some money over 30 years, but I don't see any of that happening.
Right,
It's not gonna happen.
I think we're in agreement, except for the idea that there is a limit to the growth in total expenses, capital and operating. And we don't know exactly what that limit is, but historically, we've grown consistently, pretty consistently, between 4.5% and 5%. That's the reality. If you plan for that, we can't afford the kind of operating increases that we've engaged in the past couple of years. We've expanded operating expenses too quickly, at the expense of capital.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees with that. Some of those expansions on the expense side is healthcare and, you know, benefits, that big undistributed line item.
Right.
You can't, the only way to affect that is the number of
Yeah,
FTEs.
But a major chunk of it is personnel.
Correct. No, I bet it's, what percentage, Enzo, do you think it personnel? I bet it's, if you
92.
loaded, I bet it's 92, 93, 94% of the town's expenses.
And of the increase.
I don't
We've
know.
been adding headcount.
Well, I don't know if that's a true statement. I would want to look at the numbers, because any given year, you know, you could have something that just came out healthcare related. So on the dollar side, I don't know, but definitely on the composition side, yes, it is FTE. I think the other risk to talk about, again, this is just talking, is the premise here is that taxpayers vote for an override. And that if that's part of the plan. And if they don't, then what happens? So I think there's a risk there too, to really think about how we're approaching a plan and a strategy, and if it's clearly articulated not only to town meeting members, but to taxpayers. Because if they say no, then we're pretty much backs against the wall.
Right. But I do think the idea that we're running lean is a testable proposition. Compared to who?
Well, you know, the fire department. I don't think the fire department, I don't think you could cut a person out of the fire department without closing a fire station.
We
I mean, we're not hiring, I just don't see, someone could make the decision to close a fire station. That would save some money. But you need people that are there 24/7 at both those stations. I don't see how you do it. Same with the police. You're talking major structural issue, Roger, to save money there. Now, DPW, you could cut people, but you know, at some.
You can cut people anywhere, but then it means less services, right? So you
Yeah.
cut less police, meaning less, lower service time, whatever.
What expectation of increased productivity should we have? I think it's the biggest opportunity for increased capacity, consistent increased capacity that we have, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect a 1 or 2% increase in productivity annually in most functions, including education.
Yeah, let me, I didn't finish the sentence. I said, you know, you could consider cutting someone at DPW, but here's the problem. They are the entity that does, they get it done. You know, like when there's something, someone took out a fire hydrant, you know, on Westland Avenue. You know, someone's got to fix it now. And at some point, if you so denude yourself that you can't, I mean, yes, DPW can't pave all the roads, but DPW can pave a section of a road if they had to. DPW can do a lot of things. They can rescue the town from all sorts of unexpected messes that we can get ourselves into. So I mean, there is a core, a body of humans that, like, you can't. I just, with respect, Roger, I think we're pretty lean.
Well, you know, my business was educating state and local management.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that we're already at a maximum point of productivity.
I'm not saying that.
I don't think that's where I think, again, I'm coming from, let's do a zero-based budget and see what we need for the services that we're trying to deliver. I think that's the only way you really answer that question. Going on, you know, we assume 1 to 2% productivity increase. I don't think we even can measure that. So, like, that would just be a lot of time in a weird direction. So
It's weird to measure productivity.
no, I think given if you're trying to measure, how do we get 1 or 2% more out of each individual? You're talking about performance management systems, you're talking about KPIs, metrics, and setting up that infrastructure. I come from a professional background, corporate infrastructure. That's a multi-year effort.
Yeah, I've been through it in the corporate environment. It is a
But
multi-year.
I don't think, I'm not saying that across the board, Roger. Let me give you 2 examples. I think we might need another person to help manage the capital program. I think Beth has certainly qualified to do it. I don't think she has the time to do what needs to be done. If we get all this VFA data and it's just sitting somewhere in a computer, not gonna help us at all. So I think that's a place where we might want to spend more money to make the kind of productivity gains you're talking about.
Right.
Another example is in the treasurer. Last year, we kind of got into this unfortunate squabble that everyone was talking past each other, but we were arguing that we should spend some more money on software and systems to make the treasurer's life easier in the long run. And they were looking for, a different approach. And, so that's always true, like.
And there could be an argument made, we should have some sort of CTO equivalent. Because when we had that conversation, we're talking about people talking to people. Why aren't we talking about APIs, data moving out seamlessly, integrated? When you go to make a payment for town services, click this if you want to pay that bill, click this if you want to pay this bill. So.
Right there, we could save a lot of money and get a lot of productivity.
Yeah.
Right
So it's not
there.
necessarily measuring the productivity of a person, it's looking at how the systems are interacting, so you necessarily need people.
Which is what management does if they're told, you're gonna have to do with one less person next year.
Yes and no. I think you need to spend to develop a strategy and implement the strategy, then get the yield of that strategy. So if we cut a budget and just say we're gonna, we recommend to town meeting, take this budget down, but oh, by the way, integrate these systems together via an API, that's not gonna work well.
You forgot the important step of hiring a consultant.
And hiring
to
the
tell you
professional
that.
services consultant that has API experience. Exactly.
I had another question from Carol Savage. She was wondering about, there's a reference in the handbook to overtime and hiring issues in the police department and fire department, and someone want to comment on that. I think it's true that the chiefs they've had trouble hiring and keeping people. And I think it's just the way the work environment is right now in the last couple of years. And
There are 2 comments I can share for historical perspective. One was, many years ago, it was decided that the town would save money by hiring more firefighters in order to pay less overtime. So that was a step forward. The other more recent development was that the civil service list, I think, was not posted for potential hires for police officers. So that we had postings, we had funds for those positions, but because no one was available, we couldn't hire.
so what's happened in the last couple of years, we get a budget from the town manager. We agree with it. I mean, the police chief comes in, the fire chief comes in, they say, we agree with it. They go out and try to implement it. They can't get the hiring done. So the people who are left are doing more overtime. So at the end of each year, we're way up on overtime and we're way down on personal expense. And that has happened, I think it's 3 years in a row now. And it's not a question of the salaries being on, I think it's just the way the market is right now. Let's see. Carol asked, when can taxpayers expect to see some of the interest rates on the debt exclusions retiring? And I think I gave you my answer, which is never. She asked whether the debt, we broke out the debt among school projects, construction projects for schools, water and sewer, and the town. And she asked whether that includes the reimbursement from the states and from the state. And those are our obligations. That's what we're paying. That's already been taken out. And Enzo, I thought, could you comment a little bit about OPEBs and pensions? Just, I think we have some very good news, and, you know, I can pull up the charts, because we've been on this for years, and let me get to the right one. 42, page 42. So here's the chart showing when we're gonna close our pension liability.
Yeah,
out.
we've definitely been working on this for a long time, is trying to get our pensions fully funded. And it's always been something that is 10 years out, always 10 years out. Like whenever you recalculate, then you know, we never would get close to it. So I think starting probably back in like 2018, I think we really made a concerted effort to try to fund this. And we've been increasing the budget of how much we're dedicating into the pension by 7 3/4% every year, and that's on a budget that grows by 3%. We've been growing this line item by 7+% for almost 5 or 6 years, to the point where it's now almost $7 million. So, but the good news is that we've gotten to the point where we're almost fully funded, and we were supposed to be fully funded by 2029. I think it's probably going to come a couple of years early, based on current financial metrics, which is awesome. Which means that $7 million will suddenly free up in the budget, and so this is for our contributor retirement pension. There's another pension benefit called OPEB. It's other
Post-employment benefits. It's
Post-employment
basically
benefits.
health insurance.
Yes, it's basically health insurance for retirees, because they're allowed, I think, basically the town pays 50% of the healthcare costs for retirees, for their entire pension period, right? So and that, you can imagine that cost has risen considerably over the last 20 or 30 years, to the point where it is this, you know, really big unfunded liability for a long time. So we've been kind of putting a little bit of money there, but for the most part, we're just paying it as the expense comes up. So the thought was that we would eventually, once we were fully funded in this pension fund, we'd basically switch over the tap and start paying off the other pension fund, which, you know, and that would get us to fully funded in that one, and, you know, sometime by like 2053.
2053.
Thank you. So it's gonna take a little while.
So the plan, it's this chart in your handbook. There's and Enzo, he makes the best charts. He does. It's this chart in the handbook on page 30. But it's, so the plan is we stop doing this when we finish. We take $6.5 million and put it into OPEBs. Now we're only putting in $350,000 a year, which is a joke. I think it's.
Yeah, no, it's not enough.
We're not even. It's not even showing up against the liability wheel. So that would be the plan going forward. And we without town meetings members' support, we would never fund OPEB. Carol asked what happens if we don't fund OPEB, and I think at some point, if the amount of money that we owe living retirees becomes unaffordable, because, you know, we don't have enough money in the fund to do it, and we're not appropriating it into the budget, then it becomes a problem.
It just starts eating away more and more of your existing, you know, your day-to-day, your yearly budget. So it's a good thing to put out there, and it's a commitment we made to
employees,
to town employees. So it's something we have to pay. So I think Winchester is actually doing, you know, a really good job compared to other communities of funding this, because we've made it a priority.
So
just a quick question, how sensitive is the liabilities to the move in the interest rates? Like if it's snapped.
it's sensitive.
Yeah, so if it's snapped back to like a no interest rate.
Yeah, I think it's.
This'll just tail out.
It's sensitive to a lot of things, like, you know, it's basically like you're creating this giant investment fund that is then, you know, putting against your liabilities that you know you have to pay. So it's very sensitive to investment earnings, especially. Like, it's assuming that you're gonna get a certain
So, do they lock
return.
that down, or do they have?
Yeah,
like,
So that's why it's constantly
an
moving.
LDI strategy?
Yeah.
You can see it here, Bill. So like in 2027, the normal cost of the pension would be 3.1 million, but we would put in more, but we only need to put in 6.3 because things are better than we thought. But you see, in 2028, we're kind of done, but the normal cost is still 3.2 million. So when the pension line item isn't gonna go away,
Yeah, right.
but the difference between 2.7 and 24 and 6.8 is gonna go away. It'll be the actual pension
The
liability.
delta. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, we have other questions? You haven't excoriated us too much. Lauren, you want to tell them a little bit about what you're doing on energy management? Because Lauren runs the energy management. She's our guru on the energy.
I don't know
Goes to all
about,
the meetings.
I don't know about guru, but I attend the Energy Management Committee meetings as a representative of the Finance Committee. So I get to learn about all things related to sustainability and what grants they're applying for, where we want to put solar, what are the other possibilities for renewables, and that about sums it up.
So we're trying, I mean, we're reaching out to a variety of places, and that's one of the key ones we reach out to. Sometimes we get told to stay in our lane, but we try to say yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, but not really comply. So, other questions? Again, thank you for coming. In our ideal world, systems are in place, monies are proposed to be spent, taxes are proposed, it comes to FinCom and we go, wow, fabulous, next. So we're not in the business of deciding what school is gonna be built or when or what it looks like or anything like that, or we have no dog in most of these hunts. We're just looking for a good analysis and a reasoned approach. I mean, I think, Roger was on Finance Committee. I think he verified that.
I was on for 9 years, but I have one question. Have you worked with personnel to get our contracts properly costed? We had a contract that was presented as like a 2.5% contract. I can't remember.
But it was over multiple years.
Well, it actually was like a 5% contract. If you included the benefits written into the contract, that the steps and
Right.
and so on and so forth. Or,
We haven't been heavily involved in that because it hasn't bubbled up to us as an issue, but write to me, we'll look at it.
because when I was on Finance Committee, that became a major push, especially with teacher contracts, because
Yeah,
the school committee and the town meeting did not understand that what was being described as a 3% contract was actually costing
yeah.
like 7%.
No, I remember, I remember that time. Well, I promised Dave that we would be prompt, and it was very nice of him. Again, I apologize for being early. I know it's an early hour, but this got us into WinCam and got us recorded, so thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Enzo. Thank you,
Thank you for
Lauren.
holding it. It's great.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, thank you for coming. Good night.
Yeah.
Do they have a bathroom and all that?
There's one right here.
Over here, okay, good.